Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. It really helps me out if you like, comment, subscribe, and if you would consider purchasing from one of my sponsors in the description. Thanks a bunch.
Hey everyone, today's episode is brought to you by Roll-Tru Scale Models, in particular Roll-Tru's line of precision-made HO scale wheels. Roll-Tru's precision wheels are made out of turned brass, each one turned individually and then blackened. This allows for the truest rolling wheel and the smoothest rolling wheel. Currently these wheels come in American freight sizes, that's 33-inch wheels, and they come in both short and long axle. And they also come in IHC, AHM, and Rivarossery replacement sizes. That includes the incredibly small pizza cutter wheels and the standard plastic wheels. Remember Roll-Tru for the truest rolling wheels.
Hey everyone, today I'm going to be upgrading a Mantua P7, or at least their version of the P7 known as the Royal Blue by Baltimore and Ohio. The specific version of the P7 that I have and the Royal Blue that I have is from Mantua's Collectables line, which looks like it came in around 1995-ish, and I think they did this when they were starting to be in their death throes. I'm not entirely sure why they put out this Collectables line, but they were supposed to be somewhat more prototypical and nicer than their standard locomotives. And it came with a nice collectible box, a little, I guess, a short section of track on a piece of wood, and a certificate and a couple other things. Why Mantua chose to go this direction, I'm not sure. Maybe they were reaching the end and they thought they might be able to grab some collectors and the higher profit margins they were willing to pay. Not entirely sure. But one thing's for sure is this model is kind of neat. But you can say, you know, it has this almost cheesy, cartoonish, kind of gelatinous looking coat of paint, which in itself isn't the worst thing in the world. But I don't think this necessarily makes it a higher quality model. If you look, the scoop or the cattle pusher down front is painted on this one, and you know they've added a lot more external features such as piping, and again it's all sort of this cartoonish gold. It's really sparkly and kind of really chewy. But I don't mind, it's interesting. I've actually owned two of these. I've owned this Royal Blue, and I had a President Adams, and the President Adams had everything. It had the box, the wood with the track on top of it, and the certificate and a couple other things, whereas this one actually only came with the box and the piece of wood. I don't know what happened to the certificate. Maybe if I find a certificate on eBay one of these days, I will get it. But the one nice thing about this locomotive, well, there are several nice things I get. If you look at it, it's not terrible, right? It's still a Mantua, and they sort of gussied it up a little bit, but it's still definitely a Mantua. But these are actually easier to DCC than their standard El Cheapos. Looks like the quality material is slightly higher, but what's nice is the motor in here is more usable. It's a sealed motor versus an open frame, and I think it runs smoother in general. So let's go ahead and do that. Let me show you how I DCC converted this particular locomotive. And what I'm doing here will work for other Mantuas as well. You just have to sort of figure out what all the equivalents are. So let's go ahead and do that.
This project I started working on before I started making videos, and you know, I didn't realize anyone could get anything out of my work, but now that I realize people can, I have started to film them. But this thing's already apart, so we're going to use this very similar but not exactly the same Mantua as a reference so that you can see some things, but don't worry, these are actually kind of almost the same product, but there are a few differences. For this project, and for no particular reason other than I want to get more experience with them, I've chosen a TCS Wow Sound Steam Wow. So I've used one before, and actually I didn't have very good luck with it, so I'm going to try it again. I had to return that one, so we'll try one more of these. All right, in order to start breaking things down, we need to start pulling screws, and the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to disconnect the tender from the locomotive by unscrewing this screw here. And while you're at it, you can take off the first tender screw that we're going to need to take off here. Then after that, you're going to want to unscrew these 2 screws, which will start to remove the shell from the chassis. You can actually leave the trailing truck on if you want to. You don't have to remove it, but if you think it'll make it easier, you can take that off by unscrewing this screw, but you don't have to worry about it. Then to get the remaining shell off, pull the front pilot screw out.
And underneath that, you'll find yet one more screw that you have to pull in order to pull the boiler off of the chassis. To finish pulling the tender apart, you need to, there's one screw there and there's another screw there in the back. So pull those off and the floor will come out of the tender, so you'll be able to work with it.
After you pull the boiler off, this is what you're going to see up front, and what you see there with the, I don't know, it's a little pinky browny thing, that's the smoke unit. I am not going to utilize the smoke unit. I'm just going to go ahead and take it out altogether. But what we do want to use are the front headlight wires. Now, if you want to replace this with an LED, that's up to you, but I'm not going to bother. I think this will be just fine. And the LED wires are these little black ones, the thinner black ones here. So we're going to want to go ahead and save those, but we will remove the smoke unit. So just if you want to clip through all these wires, if you want to reuse the smoke unit someday, just leave a lot of the brown and yellow wire on there so that you have something to tie it on to later. So that's what I would suggest. In terms of the electrical pickup, the actual locomotive itself handles the positive side, the right side, or the engineer's side, whereas the tender handles the left side / negative side / fireman's side. So it's red on the right and black on the left. So what we have right now is a situation where the electricity is moving from the tender to the locomotive that way, and what we want to do is we want to move it this way. Now this cheaper Mantua I'm showing you has an open frame motor, but the Royal Blue has a really nice sealed motor, and it should work a lot better thanks to that. But either way, coming from the tender, this particular side, the left side, is the negative side. So that is where the gray wire is going to eventually end up. If we flip this around, we're going to find out where the motor positive is going to go, but also we find out where the actual positive signal from the wheels come from. And the positive track input comes into this little electrical post here. So that's eventually going to run back to the tender as the red. Now, if I just turn this slightly, it's going to be easier to see this post here, which is going to be the motor positive, which is going to come in on orange. And you can see there's a black wire now that basically just immediately connects the track right to that particular electrical post. So we're going to need to cut all that black wire out of there, all that's got to go. If I really wanted to be a stickler about that little motor, I would test it to see what its stall amperage was, but I can just tell from sheer experience that that thing is not going to exceed 2 amps on the stall and should easily make 1.3 in continuous use. So I think this will work just fine. Anyway, this is fairly standard for this size DCC controller. Anyhow, there it is. Let's go ahead and get this thing out of the packet. All right, there's the controller. It is. Looks like they're up to version 4.6 now. I think the last one I had was 4.0. This harness we're going to need when we're wiring in the speaker, and it also has a very small capacitor on it. If the capacitor doesn't prove to be enough, I will put more capacitance in. Here's the primary harness. This is a 9-pin harness, and this has all of our functions that we're going to need except for sound, like I said, and I will show you how to wire that up. So first things first, we want to go ahead and get these wires off of here. We are actually not going to need them. In fact, we are going to handle all the wiring ourselves. So we'll just clip this out of here. There we go. That's the one that originally went to the tender, and I'll eventually clip that other one out of there also. And on this side, we don't need, like I said, we don't need any of these wires that they're going to give us because we'll handle this all. But let me just go ahead and pull this black wire out of here. This is the one again that took the positive input from the right side wheels and put it directly into the motor. So we don't need that. Clip that out of there. Well, we don't need that, that's for sure. We're not going to use it. And we'll just make sure that this black wire is gone. Come on, there we go. We can
straighten that out. We're actually not going to need it either, so I'll probably just end up clipping that off. So there we go. We want to go ahead and, if you want to go ahead and clip the other black wire off, you can also. And this is the post, again, that we're going to run orange into. And this here is, this other post is going to go the other direction. It's going to take the right side back into the tender. And of course, this one will bring in the gray from the tender, as I've mentioned before. So it should be pretty easy. Let's see how this goes. Okie dokie, let's go ahead and take the boiler here, and we will just clip. We don't want to keep these together. We won't want to keep the light wire and the smoke unit wire together. So we want to make sure to clip that off. There we go. We're not going to need that. And I just want to be careful here because I don't want to tug too hard, particularly on the lights wire. So I'll just cut off the smoke unit here, and we should be able to just pull that right out, I think. Let's see here again. I want to be careful. I don't want to muck with the actual light bulbs wires. But I think if we just make sure these are separated so I don't yank on. There we go. All right, that's out now, and who knows, maybe I'll do something interesting with that someday. I don't particularly, straight ahead smoke units really aren't worth that much to me. Blown ones are more interesting, and I don't want to tax this controller. Maybe someday I'll do one and I'll show you how to put one on a relay. And that way you don't have to worry about the amperage off of the controller. In fact, that's what I'll do maybe with one of these coming up soon. All right, there we go. So the smoke unit's out, and now you have those two wires. So fair enough. All right, let's head on back to the tender. And if you notice, there are two wires left over that are hanging out for that light bulb there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the assumption that the light bulb in the front and the light bulb in the back are one and the same. Again, if you really don't want to make these assumptions, or you want to try something a little more modern, go ahead and use an LED. But the one thing I want to do is I want to make sure that my controller doesn't blow out the light bulb, which has happened on several conversions that I've done, and it's obnoxious pretty much every time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test the input voltage here by just using my DC track power, and I'm just going to slowly raise the power until the light gets to about where I want it. Looks about right. I don't want it too bright. There's no reason for it to be super bright. Yeah, right around there I think is fine. That'll be enough to actually show that there's a light on, but it won't be so much that, you know, the light bulb goes out super early because it's super bright. I think that'll work just fine. So now I want to see how much voltage that is that I had going into the light bulb. And let's see if I get lucky here and they gave me a 12-volt light bulb to begin with. Hey, who knows? It happens, right? Let's get the voltmeter, set it for DC, clip one in, and clip the other in, and we will see. Come on, big money. Oh my gosh, look at there. I had 14 3/4 volts heading into the light bulb, and it lit up just fine. So effectively, the controller is supposed to put out 12 volts, but it actually may put out around 15 something volts, but that'll just be perfect. There's nothing I have to do. All right, let's go ahead and take the primary wiring harness. This is the primary wiring harness from the DCC controller. I don't need this much lead for any of these wires, so I'm just gonna snip this off after about 2 inches-ish, something like that, and that should be more than enough. And we can reuse this wire even in this project. So you always need patch wires and jump wires, so we'll just set those aside. And here we go. And if you haven't done one of these, you can look up what all these colors mean, but I will go ahead and do this really quickly for you. All right, let's see. You don't need the purple. Don't worry about that. The next one is black. That is the left side or negative side or fireman side pickup.
The white wire is for our headlight. We're certainly going to need that. It's gray. It looks black, but it's actually gray. That is the motor negative, so we're definitely going to need that. The orange is the motor positive. That's going to go into the steam engine. The red is going to come back from the steam engine. The yellow is going to be the rear light. The blue is the common voltage. It's plus 12 volts. And the green we're going to use for something really special, so don't forget that. So if we count up the number of wires that need to come in from the locomotive, which is 1, and the ones that need to go back out, that's 5, I'm going to use these small 6-pin connectors. And you're thinking, oh, they're colored, that really sucks, I don't want all these colors. Don't worry about it, they're easy to go back in and paint black. But while you're assembling this, at least I think it's better to have the colors. Now, I could do it with all black. There are ones that are all black. I certainly could do it, but I'm not going to torture myself like that right now. It's just easier to go buy a flat black or gloss black paint pen and just paint over these. I don't see that there's anything wrong with that. So we will go through the different, let me see if I can get this focused in properly here. Here we go. And let's see. So what we've got is going to be this. The red is going to come back from the locomotive into the tender because that is the right side or the positive pickup. The black is going to go out. All these, the rest of these are going to go back out. The black is going to go out to the locomotive as the motor negative. That's the gray wire on the actual controller harness. But since we don't have gray, we're going to substitute the black wire for gray. So gray in from the controller into this black, and then that's going to go into the locomotive. The headlight is still white, so absolutely no problems there. The yellow is going to become the motor positive, which is actually going to be the orange. So yellow, orange, close enough. That should be easy to remember. So again, once again, that's going to go into the steam locomotive. The last two are color equal, so the blue will be our common VCC, and the green will be the control wire for a really nice special thing. All right, so for the male side, this is the male side, right? Because the pins are protruding. The male side of the actual cable, I epoxied that down into the chassis, and it's really nice because there's a groove in there and it's exactly the right size. So that'll just work swimmingly, I think. And these are all the inbound and one outbound wire that are coming in. So what we're going to have to do now is clip these to the length so that we can put everything in place. So let's pause this for a second, and what we'll do is we will take the track in off a little post here and put red into it, and we will put the yellow or motor positive and solder it into that little post. All right, that shouldn't be a problem. Now we flip this over, and the one we need to worry about here is this little electrical post, and that will become the motor negative. So that will be the black, and that will get soldered in there. So no problem. Okay. I've gone ahead and done that, so here we go. Yellow going into the little motor post, and red soldered into that little connector. There we go. There's a more close-up view so you can see I'm not lying to you. And yeah, hopefully you got that. We'll flip this over, and the black, which is once again the motor negative, gets soldered. Just make sure that when you do that, you don't push that little post back into the metal there. Maybe the paint will hold it, maybe not, but you don't want to take the chance. So there you have it. No problems. And if you look on the VCC positive, I've actually just broken the insulation just a little bit, and I've clipped off the green, because what we're going to do is we're going to put the firebox light here. And so we need to run the positive and control it with the green. And in order to do that, I'm going to use just a red 3.3 volt LED. And if we look here, it has random flicker for firebox. So I think that'll be pretty neat. We want it to, of course, run both in forward and reverse. So we'll go through that and set that up. Pretty keen. I've done a few locomotives and have put fireboxes in them. And I like the effect, quite frankly. I think it looks pretty neat. Yeah, there's a second random flicker too, huh? Well, I may try it, but if not, I'll use this one that they specifically said it's supposed to look like a firebox. All right, so what we need to do with our LED is the longer post will be the positive and the shorter one will be the negative, and the positive will get soldered into the blue wire,
and the negative will get soldered into the green. If you're not sure, the negative side usually is flat, has a flat spot here, so you can feel for that if that's what you want to do. So on the tender side, if you look here in the harness, since the tender is responsible for picking up the track negative, I've just simply wrapped that black wire around this post that was conveniently placed there, and I've soldered that in because the whole base of the tender here is responsible for bringing in the negative side from the trucks. Okay, so here's what I've done. You can see here I've soldered the connector together, and what I'm eventually going to do is I'm going to grind out 2 slots here in the floor plate or the base plate, and that will allow 3 and 3 of these connectors cables to go through it, because I have drilled through the tender before, but if I can avoid drilling through the tender, I do, because it just bothers me to have to kind of mess up a tender like that. So here we go. What I've done is, since this is just a regular filament bulb, it doesn't matter, but I've put in a 2-pin connector here, and that way if we need to, for whatever reason, take things apart, I don't have to cut it and resolder it. And what I will do is I will just bring this down over the little the little screw hole here, and I'll just put it on each side so that I know they won't interfere. On this side, I've soldered the blue into the red so that I know it's positive, and the white into the black, since I know that's going to be the negative. And when I put the actual boiler on, I will make that connection. And same thing. And what I've done, and here's the firebox light, what I've done is I've drilled a little tiny hole into this piece. There we go. And the firebox LED is going to fit right through that. And I think that'll look pretty nifty and pretty neat. Just remember that when you do this, you have to put a 7500 ohm resistor in between the blue wire and the longer LED wire. So don't forget that. That's something you gotta do. Otherwise, you will surely blow out the LED pumping 12 plus volts into it when it only wants around 3.3. Not only am I going to drill a hole in the front of this for the firebox, but I'm going to drill a hole on the top. And the reason is this. This actually normally sits down on the chassis, and it kind of rides in that little groove down there. But since I've taken up that groove with the actual harness, what I want to do is, by drilling this little hole in the top, as you see here, it's not the best hole. I wanted some slop. What I am going to do is normally a screw sits in between the boiler and the top of the cab here, but by drilling that hole in there, what I can do is I can actually run a slightly longer screw through this little detail piece, through the boiler and into the roof of the cab. And what that'll do is it'll lift up this little detail piece far enough off of the chassis so that the harness will ride in there. Okay, this is actually a pretty large tender, so I'm not going to worry about it. And if you look on the rear light, I did the same thing. I put a 2-pin connector here so that if I had to change things out, I don't have to snip wires and resolder them. I can just simply connect this to the harness coming off of the DCC controller. And on the speaker, what I did is I did the same thing, except I used the opposite connector, and that way I won't get them mixed up. That could be pretty bad actually to mix those two up. So I didn't want to do that, and this is actually a pretty deep speaker box, and it's going to fit in there with double-sided tape really, really well. So that's no problem. Okay, well, let's go ahead and take a look at the secondary harness, and the 2 wires that we care about off of here are the purple ones. On soundtracks, they're brown. On lock sound, they're purple. So we'll just look for the 2 that are the same color, and those are the speaker wires. Their speaker signal is AC, so it doesn't really matter which side you put on which. So on that side, I am going to install the other side of the connector, just like I did here, so I can plug that in. Let's take a look at the base plate of the tender, and it has those two little holes in it, so I think I'm gonna get enough air movement, so I'm not gonna worry about drilling more. It doesn't have any kind of holes in it or anywhere for the air to move. You may want to drill some holes. Now probably if I was drilling from scratch, I would put more in there than just 2, but I think 2 will be enough, to be honest with you, especially with how large and deep this tender is. So we'll just leave that alone. All right, here are the slots that I ground into the base plate of the tender so that the 2 sides, 3 and 3 wires can ride in those, and I won't have to pinch them in place, and they'll have some flexibility. And what I eventually did is I used dry tack just to make sure that the wires would line up like I'd like. There we go, there's the TCS. It's actually not taped in there or anything. I'm just gonna let it ride in there. If you add tape or anything, you can start to actually mess with the controller's heat dissipation, and I just don't want to do that. So, all right, let's go ahead and plug the secondary harness in there. I've already got the primary harness in there. Come on, this is, doggone, I don't know why I don't have the dexterity to do this. There we go, get that in there. And we can start to button things up. And again, I'm not going to tape everything down. I'm just going to go ahead and just sort of slot it in there for now just to see how everything works. So, all right, let's go ahead and just connect the connector together. There we go. That's how that's going to fit in there. And we'll plop this down on the track and hopefully things will work. I'm not going to worry about the headlight right now. Just want to see if things activate like the Wonder Twins. So let's see. So it maketh the chuffing noise, but it doesn't seem to make it the chuffing movement. Not quite sure what's going on with there. Can't quite figure this out. Let's turn it way up. It's chuffing, but it's not moving. I don't know what's going on here. It's a little bit concerning. Let's go ahead and dump the track, probably, and yeah, that'll do it. So didn't have a very good solder joint, I guess. So yeah, that's not so great. So fair enough. Let me go handle that. There we go. Magic of video editing. I've handled it. Let's put this back on the track and see how this works now. Quite sure what happened, but at least it should be a pretty simple problem to fix. There we go. So what I think is happening here is it's used to having that weight on top of it in order to give it some sort of adhesion so that not only can it pull properly, but it'll actually stay connected to the track. So it looks like it's working better now though. All right, so what I think partially happened is the fact that the initial speed setting is too low, and because of that, the motor's stalling. But I realized that also if I wanted to perhaps help this a little bit with bad track, I can replace this anemic capacitor
with a pair of capacitors that is much larger. So I'm going to do that also and rebutton this up and see how that goes. Okay, there it's soldered in, and I think this, like I said, there's so much room in this tender, I can afford to do things like this, and it won't be a problem. All right, with that done, I went ahead and put the shell on, and I plugged in everything. Let's see how this works. It's working, but not quite as well as I would like, so I'm going to go ahead and pull the base plate off of here, and I'm going to oil the internals. The base plate's held on by 4 screws, but there are 5. There's a screw directly behind the main drive gear, but you don't have to remove that. I accidentally did. It's not a tragedy if you do, but you just don't need to. Just do the outer 2 screws on each side of the base plate. If we look in here, we can go ahead and use our super smooth to both oil and lubricate. And what's nice is it has full bearings across the whole thing, so that's pretty cool. And we'll go ahead and oil all of these too, since goodness, this doesn't look like it was run much at all in the past. In order to work this lubrication in, make sure it's spread out nice and evenly, I'm gonna go ahead and put this up on rollers. And again, the more I look at this, the more I realized it wasn't run very much, so this will help break in the model also. Alright, so there you have it. It's working pretty well. It sounds like the chuff sound is a little bit loud, so I'm going to have to go in and adjust that down. Or, I actually don't like this chuff a super duper amount. It's pretty good, and it would be great if it was the default. But, well, it is the default, but I'm going to probably go in and choose a different chuff sound. So it looks like this thing is working pretty well. It'll need some fine tuning. There's no doubt about that. But I think we've got a runner here. And I have given this Mantua collectible a new life, which I'm really happy to do. I don't think it was run much at all. I think it was a box queen or display queen. And now it is going to actually run on my track. Very nice. Very, very nice. And it looks like what I'm going to have to do is I think the actual low speed setting, which is CV2, is a little too low, and that's going to cause the motor to stall out sometimes. So I'm going to want to go ahead and change that, but I'll change it later. I don't see it being a big problem. So Wunderbar, how can you not be happy with this? That'll be it's going to be very, very cool looking running down the track. You might be wondering to yourself, what kind of cool things am I going to pull with this? And what I have is a Bev Bell / Athearn, I guess it's actually Athearn Bev Bell Capital Limited. And it looks like this set's relatively rare. I see it come up very, very rarely on eBay. And when it does, the cars actually sell for pretty decent money. I had this and I'm like, well, this will be good to pair with my cool Mantua royal blue. The color doesn't quite match perfectly, but I'm not too worried about that. It has a really nice Capital Limited printed on here. And again, I'm not a big Athearn fan, but within the last couple months, this is the second Bev Bell consist that I've come across that I think will look pretty nice with one of my locomotives. Here we go. Has nice, really dark regal blue and navy, excuse me, it's regal blue and gold. And these will have to do some, I'll have to do some touching up, and I might either make interiors for them or I might make silhouettes for them. I'm not sure, but I think these will look great running with this locomotive. Okay, this was a relatively easy conversion, particularly for a steam engine. If you want to start with a relatively easy steam engine to convert, then this one might be the one for you. You don't have to drill any holes, really. You have to cut those slots, but you don't have to drill any holes in any type of brass or anything like that, which, again, I've done, but I almost kind of cringe at myself for having to do it. I don't like it. But I've done it with a couple, and I suppose I'll have to do it again here in the future. Thanks for joining me today. I hope this helps you in some way. Every time I do this, you know, I'll probably film it because I've got to go through and do these things anyway. So if somebody gets something out of it, I think that's great. I'll give you a running session here. I hope you enjoy it, especially with these keen-looking Bev Bell cars. As always, wish you happy model railroading. Let me know what you think. Please comment and like. And if you want to see more of my stuff, it really helps me if you subscribe. It helps my algorithm quite a bit. So until next time, you know, if you have any questions or comments, put them down in the comment section below, and I'll try to get back to them as soon as I can. I try to get back to everybody, at least in one way or another. So, yep, again, appreciate it. Take care. Talk to you later. Catch you next time.